Hey guys, welcome to everyone joining us here today for the Real World Asset Roundtable, talking about real world assets in general and a little bit about Cardano and real world assets. I'm joined today by three experts. I'm going to be sitting kind of in the background, hosting any questions that anybody has that is joining us. Please do ask in the comments and I will put them to the panel that's here. We're going to treat this like a discussion. Please do share it out. With any live stream I've done before, the more people we get in, the more interaction we get from people watching. I always find the better value that we can bring and give. So I'm going to give each of the guests 30 seconds to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into the topics because they know themselves better than me trying to introduce themselves. John, do you want to introduce yourself? And just very high level on each of you guys, and then we'll find out more as we go through the talk.
Thanks for the intro, Paul. Seb, if you want to move to the next slide. Oh, great. So I'm Jon Kravetz. I'm the CEO of a new type of marketplace on Cardano where real-world assets can be traded alongside more traditional crypto assets. Previously, I worked at companies like Nike and Rexel, and I worked with a lot of product data. So that really kind of informs my belief in the disruptive potential of real-world assets in the blockchain industry. Thanks.
Thanks, John. We'll go to the next slide, Eva, please. And then we have Tim. Do you want to give the introduction to yourself?
Yeah. Hi, Paul. Thanks for being our host. I'm the co-founder of IMX, an identity solution, and Finest. And around our identity solution, we built some satellites where you can use your identity, or in this case, your KYC data, that you can log in easily and don't have to repeat this not so loved KYC every time.
Great, thanks. And then we have Nicola. Do you want to give the intro to yourself?
Thank you, Paul. I'm Nico. I'm a lawyer. Working specifically in the blockchain realm, been doing that for the past 4 years, and I'm the head of legal at Swan Partners. It's a Swiss consulting firm that, again, is specialized in assisting blockchain and Web3 projects. Very happy to be here with you today.
Great. I think that really gives us a good base of knowledge here. We have the tech, we have the business side, and we have the legal side. So John has put together the slides that are here. So John, I'm going to let you kick off the topics on this, and Tim, Nicola, jump in anytime you want, and I'm going to probably throw in a few questions here and there as well, but we're going to leave this as an open discussion, kind of a chat over what's going on, and hopefully people get value from that.
Thanks so much, Paul. If we want to go to the next slide, Seb, we can kind of give an intro. So we're here to talk about real-world assets. So just to give a really basic kind of definition of what a real-world asset is, it's simply something in the real world that you can experience with one of the 5 senses. So if you can touch, see, feel, smell, or hear something, then potentially it could be considered a real world asset. In contrast, financial assets such as stocks, bonds, or even cryptocurrencies, they do represent ownership or claims, but not of objects in the physical world. So I just found this this quote by Mark Twain quite funny, and you know, he hit the nail on the head. He said, "Buy land, they aren't making it anymore." So his kind of joke is that, you know, real world assets are finite. When it comes to digital assets or financial assets, essentially they're infinite. You know, I can you know, create a gajillion tokens, right? But there's only so many trees, there's only so many so much gold, you know, so on and so forth. So I think it's just good to create that distinction. I don't know if any of my panel buddies here have anything to add on this, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
The quote is perfect. It fits to us a lot, because it's also real estate is the biggest asset we have worldwide. And for me, that's let's call it the Champions League or the World Championship of tokenization will be, in my opinion, the real estate, because it's also very complicated. But I think we will talk later about this.
From a legal point of view, if I can give you a definition of an asset, is basically something that can be an object of a right, which I think is pretty broad as well.
Yeah, I think that gives us an introduction. John, I know in the next one you're going to get into different types of real world assets and what can actually be tokenized. So we move on to that.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, great. I mean, here are some of the main categories for real world assets, specifically from more of an investor mindset. So first on the right here, we have real estate, and this is something that Tim and Nicola mentioned. Certainly a lot to explore there. There's commodities such as like gold, gemstones, and then even things that are a little bit less sexy like oil or agricultural products. Then we have art and collectibles, which I'm a big fan of. And then luxury and commercial goods is actually an interesting category. And then one that you don't normally think about is equipment and machinery. Like there's a huge third-party market for, heavy machinery, large vehicles, and so even in the industrial markets, real-world assets come into play. So real-world assets, there are some properties that a real-world asset has, and while not every real-world asset contains all of these properties, some factors that come into play are intrinsic value, real-world utility, like gold has value, but it can also be used in chips and other technology applications. Some are yield-bearing, like if you own a home or something and you rent it out, there's some yield there. I'm sure others might have some examples of this. And value appreciation. Sometimes these real-world assets might naturally appreciate in value over time for a multitude of different reasons. One of them being just natural scarcity, because resources are limited. So this is a huge, kind of a broad market here. I wonder, once again, opening it up to my panel buddies here for any additional commentary.
Yeah, what I'm missing here are like copyrights. You can, a real world asset can also be a copyright, or like you have rights to market rights. If you work for Nike and you give out the license to be able to be the distributor for Germany, that's a right. And I think this is also very interesting, or like songs, we have Neum in the Cardano community, for example, and they're working with copyrights. I think this is something which I don't know where we can put it in these 5 topics, but I think this is something we should also think about.
On my side, the list is actually very exciting because think about the possibilities that these lists open up. I would like to ask even the people that are watching us, what are the investment opportunities that you have in these categories? Yes, you can purchase a house. Yes, you can purchase a painting if you have maybe enough money to buy something valuable, but you don't have the opportunity of investing in it with financial instruments, I don't know, such as ETFs, CDPs that allow you to invest $100 a month and really kind of diversify your portfolio, invest in different asset classes. At the moment, okay, people can invest in crypto, people can invest in the traditional stock market, but the investment opportunities are quite limited. Hedge funds, professional investors have much more opportunities. This is also why they generate better returns, apart from having better information. But their horizon, their spectrum is bigger. They can invest in art. And if you look at the performance of a lot of art pieces over the past decades, have been amazing. Even luxury goods, it's famous, the example of the Hermes Birkin bag and how much it appreciated over time as luxury watches and real estate as well. So tokenization here is an instrument to democratize and open the access to investing in these classes. And this is what's really great about real world asset tokenization.
Yeah, I can follow you on this. When I've been a student, it's some years, some decades ago, it was quite tough to finance, travel, we just talked about diving, to get the money to do your hobby, to get the money to collect what is your most favorite collectible. And this was for me, if we have now the possibilities to invest in everything, or we soon will have it, like back in the days, Uran, it's like a little bit political, but Uran was like going up, very, very tough, but you couldn't invest there. It was not possible. And also real estate, it's very difficult for a student when you don't have the funds. But for me also is, if you talk democratizing investment, it also leads to, you can be able to build communities and make kind of a swarm investment. So for real estate, we see that the biggest hotel chain without having a room is Airbnb, and let's buy together an apartment in a city where you always have tourists, like in Germany, it's Berlin. You have, it will be rented every day. And, if we buy it together, and then we can, because we can't do it alone, and we profit from the income. This is something what is for me the most interesting thing in the tokenization of real world asset.
I think just from my side as well, what I really like is that it opens up a lot of opportunities to people that might have smaller funds that previously would only be open to larger investors, that people can group together. And as well as that, producers, that they can tokenize something as soon as it is, I think it was mentioned, resources there. As soon as the resources are taken out of the ground or whatever it is, that can be tokenized and people can come in and buy it at that early stage. I think we had finished up on the real world asset examples. John, do you want to move to the next slide? Or actually, there's one question I had left on this, is the legal standing. And this is for Nicola as well. So we talked about the real world assets allowing smaller investors to be able to invest and own a share in maybe real estate or in gold or in something else. But how is that seen outside of crypto from a legal ownership side now?
How much time do you have? We can
we
can write a book about it. No, let's say this. There are many different real world asset tokenization projects, and I recommend people really to do their own due diligence and research and read the terms and conditions, or read someone that reviewed those, because you need to understand actually what kind of rights are you getting. There are various ways of doing this real world asset tokenization. For instance, with real estate, the most typical is to allocate the real estate asset in an SPV, so in a company, and then tokenize the shares of the company and sell those, so you have the same rights of a normal shareholder, which is not too bad. But at the same time, it's not, let's say, the direct tokenization. There are also jurisdictions such as Liechtenstein that have a specific legal framework that allows for the direct tokenization of assets. It's called the token container model, in which basically you put the assets in a company that is authorized then to issue these tokens that are related to the assets that the company then holds on custody on behalf of the token holders. There are various ways of doing this, either from a contractual point of view or through basically other means. But let's give two takeaways. First one, it is possible to do it in a way that is legally sound and safe for every kind of investor, private, institutional, and so on. Second point is nobody I mean, not everybody is doing it in maybe the proper way or giving the same level of guarantees. There's not a standard. So it's important to check what is the project that you are purchasing the assets from and how do they do this.
Okay, yeah, it's a complex field, and as you say, we could go on for hours probably talking about it. We'll see how time goes today, and maybe come back to certain aspects on it and how it differentiates between different types of assets and what can be tokenized without the likes of KYC and what actually does need it and the transfer after. But John, do you want to move on to your next slide?
I like to jump in. I hate KYC too, but you have to KYC. You need to get, how should we build up legally compliant systems without knowing who you act with? It's a really big problem. And I know that what my company is building like an onboarding solution. The KYC is always the most unsexiest thing you have when you like to buy a token. Like, oh, first KYC, oh, KYC again. And I know people who are a little bit mature than me, even older. They just don't buy things anymore when they have to do the 100th time a KYC. So KYC is an obstacle, but I think it's very necessary, at least for the next 10 to 15 years. Perhaps the technology will move ahead, but onboarding solutions are always, with a KYC. How can you like to have, KYC is not like people suck out data of you. It's in Europe especially, it's to protect you. That we say, yeah, it's his token and he purchased it in a legal way. There is no money laundering behind it and all this. For sure, it's not nice to make a KYC, but I'm always, get confronted, when we launched the Granite block, what we tokenized, people say, oh, I have to do a KYC. I have to do a KYC. Yes, you have, because then it's your token. It's really yours and not like it's faked or something. So KYC is not only a law. I see it that it's really customer protection, investors protection. So KYC is, I know it's an obstacle. Nobody likes it. Even me don't like it, but it's very important.
Yeah, look, it's KYC is there for a reason. It's not all bad. I think the thing is that when we have to KYC in multiple different places, when we get to the stage where you have KYC, your wallet is KYC'd, and then anything that interacts with that, you don't have to do it every time. I think that will be a good stage, but maybe a little bit off topic here, but pulling it back
it's existing. We have reusable KYC. It's existing on Cardano. Big Web2 companies have a reusable KYC. So we're getting to it, and blockchain is kind of the tech solution to make the KYC reusable in a reliable way. So we have it finally on Cardano, it's running. So it's perfect.
Okay,
John, back over to you for the next slide, Seba.
So real world assets, there's in terms of without blockchain technology and just, trying to get involved in these markets, there's several kind of problems or obstacles that makes it harder for, not just the everyday person, but also accredited investors and institutions to deal with these real world assets. So there's inefficiency, there's intermediaries, there's settlement times, and a lot of bureaucracy around some of these industries. And of course, some of this falls under the legal aspects and compliance stuff that Nicola and Tim were talking about, but there's also definitely room for improvement in these areas. There's limited accessibility, like if you want to do something in a country across the world, it might be near impossible because of geographic, language, regulatory, and minimum investment requirements. There's market fragmentation, so there's different, centralized systems, across, the broad kind of industry of real world assets, and they may not have, integration with one another. There may be a lot of paperwork that needs to be done, and this just really slows things down. And then the intermediaries, like these third parties, whether they're real estate brokers or traders or miners or whatever you want to call it, they're all taking a cut, and this really increases the cost, right, when it comes to interacting with real world assets. And then back to what kind of Tim was touching on in terms of custody, verification of asset ownership, transfer, and authenticity can really be improved with some of this blockchain identity process. Like Tim said, KYC isn't sexy, but there's also some benefits to it in terms of the individual's security over the asset. So, and then, having to store your own real world assets, that can get pretty difficult. Like, let's say you want to buy a big cat forklift or something, you're not going to put it in your living room. So, these problems collectively create more systemic issues. Like, so with folks having limited access to these real world asset categories, it really, increases the global wealth gap because there's just access issues, limited opportunities for investors of all type, and there's security issues and regulatory burdens with all these centralized systems and bureaucratic processes, and I've heard of people's deeds to their homes getting stolen, and there's all kinds of kind of cracks in these systems, and then the cost. It's like if you have to pay all of these intermediary costs, it makes it very inefficient to work with real world assets as opposed to what we have today currently with financial assets or strictly digital assets. So really a lot of room for improvement here. I'm sure there's more problems. I don't know if any of you guys wanted to touch on this, but we do have the solution slide next, so that's exciting.
Maybe we get into the solutions and then talk about the problems after that then?
Yeah. So the solution really is tokenization of these real world assets with blockchain technology. So what we can do is essentially represent these real world assets as digital tokens on a blockchain. Essentially, the tokens serve as digital certificates of ownership, whether it's full or partial ownership of an asset. And this allows us to interact with real world assets in a much more efficient manner. Now, fractionalization and tokenization are sometimes confused with one another, but fractionalization is really the process of taking an asset and dividing it into smaller tradable units. And this is what I believe, my co-hosts or panel buddies referred to earlier in terms of kind of expanding the opportunity. Well, I think Tim was touching on the fact that young people may want to get involved in real estate, but they can't purchase a whole property, but they can purchase a fraction of a property and then earn some potentially passive income on that. So this really is going to open up the door for a lot of people, right? But tokenization is really just the act of turning either a whole asset or a fraction of an asset into a token, essentially correlating ownership of that real world physical asset with a token. And then as you can see in this kind of art, if you had a piece of art, and we can kind of talk about this later, you could divide it into a number of different pieces. And then if it was like a $1 million painting, you could own, like a very small piece of the painting potentially. It's an interesting discussion that we can talk about in a future slide. But I don't know if you guys had anything to add here.
We have a sparring partner, let's say. It's from Switzerland. It's the Signum Bank, and they have tokenized the Picasso. I think 2 years or 1.5 years already back, and it was a very high profit for the people who bought the token. And I think this is something. I'm a collector nerd. I'm really collect, and some pieces I like to collect. It's just too expensive. So if you are in a collectors community, and collectors are always on the hunt, they find things, and hey, John, I found this, should we buy it? We get the community together. Okay, call them, send an email. Let's buy it. Can we do it? This would be very interesting in the future. Today, it's very, very hard. It's possible, but I think it's very hard. But this is something where I like to move with real world asset tokenization, that you can react like in the real world with your tokens. So you find an asset, a collectible, a picture, sneakers, a car, a watch, and just call your community, say, hey, should we buy it? I think we can sell it in 1 year and make 50% profit. This is really something very cheap. I know exactly which picture it is. Wow, let's do it. Come on. This is something, alone I can't do it. But with a community, a worldwide living community, a really united community, this is possible in the future. And this is really, really sexy. I love that.
Yeah.
On my side,
Go ahead. Sorry, Nicola.
No problem. But on my side, I would just add, let's say, one word to tokenization and fractionalization that maybe has a bit more meaning from a legal point of view, and it's securitization. So turning an asset into a security, or actually a series of securities. And I really kind of want to stress that our economy developed around these. The first stock corporations, corporate bonds. And so even what is a corporate bond? Simply, it's a loan that has been put into a certificate, actually into a series of certificates, each one that is standardized, that has the same face value, and then you can sell them to many more people. And if I'm a company, it's way better for me to be able to tackle a vast crowd rather than having just to negotiate with 1 or 2 banks that then basically can sort of have a lot of power towards me because I have no alternatives. And the point I want to make is that through securitization, through providing more access to capital markets to more people and creating more interactions between who was offering the assets and a demand for the assets, it created economic growth. And we can unlock this economic growth in way more areas, which are basically the areas that you showed in the previous slides.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Nicola. And I like the fact that Tim kind of mentioned this idea about working together with your community to purchase real world assets, and instead it's just very efficient because we can all just own a piece of it without having to create a legal contract and dividing it up. When you think of fractionalization, traditionally you might think of going on a platform and buying 1/100th of an asset or one token. But the fact that you can act with your community, and it's almost like that real world asset almost acts as like a mini DAO just for that asset or something. And that's actually a legal structure that I know that they're using with real estate, is creating, at least in the United States, creating a DAO LLC for each actual property. And this is how some companies are doing, working with real estate fractionalization right now. I'm sure Nicola has.
No, it is correct. You can do that here in Switzerland as well, and it's basically related to you have an SPV, so you have one legal person that purchases the assets, and then all the others basically they have a right towards this legal person, which is represented by a token, and you can do that through Wyoming DAO LLCs. In Switzerland, you don't even need a particular structure simply because Swiss law provides that you can tokenize the shares of a normal company. So we didn't need to create anything kind of special. But yeah, that's one. I would say from a legal point of view, if you want to distinguish, there are 2 main categories. This one is one, so there is one legal entity and you have a right towards this legal entity that then owns the assets. Or there's another category in which there is the platform, the service provider that is also a custodian. And then you have a right towards this person that basically own the assets on your behalf. Or there are even kind of other models in which the platform provider wants to provide even further assurance to the users. And so they say, okay, the custodian is a third party that is independent and will just hold the assets on behalf of the users. And it's not even controlled by me to ensure the kind of like safest environment for people to invest. And then there are various combinations of the above.
So if it's Switzerland, it's like there's a house, a DAO, they sell the token. Am I allowed to sell the token on the secondary market without any regulations then?
Good question. You are definitely allowed to do that. It's more of a question for the platform that operates the secondary market if they are allowed to operate the secondary market or not. So in Switzerland, we have a regulation related to DLT market infrastructure that allows basically for security token exchanges. There are a few getting regulated now. So those people will be able to list tokenized real world assets and allow for secondary trading. Or you can do it on decentralized platforms. And the point is that nobody can really stop them. So they can do it. And in the end, it's a sort of peer-to-peer trading. And yes, notably for peer-to-peer trading, there is no limit. Like you team can
yes,
sell
that's
it
what I like to
yes.
hear. That this is, let's do it. We like to have it on MintSwap, on Wing Riders, on Liquid. There we like to have these tokens. To make business also on Cardano. And I think the Switzerland is very ahead with regulations. We have in the rest of Europe, the European nations, we have the MiCA, the market. It's a regulation for markets in crypto assets. It's quite a tough regulation, but it's finally a regulation where we can look at and do it right and do it financial market compliant. And yes, the DEXs are so important, because they help us later to really have a secondary market where I can buy without being part of a DAO, without being part of another legal entity. So this is something which I think which will really accelerate the real world assets in the future, the secondary market, not only the launches.
Just to come back on that, for the assets can be sold, but does the ownership, is it recognized that the ownership transfers then to whoever the new user is that buys it or holds the token at the time of, say, it's a property that people have bought, they all have their own, whether it's an NFT or a token or that represents their share of it. When it comes to that being sold off, if some of them shares or tokens have moved around since it was initially bought, are the final holders the ones that are recognized as the shareholders or the share owners?
Yes, if the project is set up correctly from a legal point of view, the token is also a legal certificate of ownership of either the share of the company or the share of the assets. And therefore, yes, it's the ultimate, is the person holding the token that is the right possessor of the asset. You might need to identify yourself. So coming back to the KYC problem, there are some projects that use decentralized secondary markets, but in order to stay compliant, they say, okay, you purchase the token on a DeFi platform or on a DEX, actually more of a DEX, on a DEX, perfect. But if you want then to come to me and claim your right, I need to identify you. So, okay, on the secondary market can be run via DEXs, but then you need to KYC with me in order for you to use your right. For instance, I don't know, to claim rewards or yields coming from the assets.
Yeah, let's move to the next slide where we kind of, so this is an example, and I'm interested to hear what my my panel buddies have to say about this, because when I think a lot of focus on real world assets incorporates fractionalization and securitization, right? But I look at things a little bit more holistically, where it's like I just view all real world assets as things that can potentially be tokenized, and then they can be fractionalized, and then they can be put back together again, and it's just the way I look at things. So let's take an example here of this 20 unit, building. If I wanted to tokenize this building, I could, and I don't know if this is legally accurate, Nicola, so I'm sorry about this, but I just wanted to make it really easy for people to kind of understand the different components. But a secure custodian, would hold the deed, right? And then either a service provider or some sort of financial entity would create a certificate of ownership with transfer rights, and then you could, create some really nice metadata that had all of the kind of attributes of the building, like the year it was built, how many units it has, how many square feet, you could go down the list, right? And having this metadata from a product standpoint or from a application standpoint is really, really useful, because we're marrying kind of the attributes, the asset attributes, with the actual ownership of the asset, right? Now, in the centralized world, you're going to have completely different systems holding all of this information, which creates a lot of additional cost and inefficiency and security risks, right? So having all this together is really useful. And in this instance, this building, unless there was a absolutely identical building, which is not possible, if it was tokenized, it would be an NFT. It would be a unique token. This building is unique. There's only one building like this in the world. So if you wanted to just tokenize the building itself, it would be an NFT with the properties, the address, the square footage, the location, so on and so forth. Now, Nicola, I do have a question for you. When it comes to tokenizing a building like this isn't really securitization, is it? What is this exactly?
Okay. Good question, and I can answer. Just be aware that the real estate tokenization is the most complex one. Why? Because real estate is regulated in every jurisdiction, and not usually you need a notary to transfer real estate asset. There is a public registry in which the ownership of real estate assets is recorded. So this sometimes doesn't really match with the kind of like on-chain ownership. But the model that you kind of drafted here works. It works perfectly because you have put a custodian in the picture. So we have this actor that needs just to be a reliable third party that does only that doesn't do any other business activity, so they will not go bankrupt or whatever. They just hold the assets on behalf of other people. So on the paperwork, we could say, to make it simple, the name of the owner of the building would be the name of the custodian. And then the custodian can issue these certificates that are tokens from a very practical point of view that give rights related to the real estate asset that has been tokenized. Now, calling them certificate of ownership, and I don't know how much you want to delve into the legal intricacies of these, may not be super accurate because, okay, I'll just explain this thing and then that's it. But property is an absolute right, so it means it can be enforced against everyone. It's any other right. It's a relative right. It's enforced against the owner of something. Okay, so the certificate that you will give away is a certificate that proves that you have certain entitlement to the piece of building, meaning that you get the rent and then all sort of rights, but it's not property. Property is the right that the custodian has over the assets. And yes, we could say that this property right has been held on behalf of the token holders. This we can say.
Right. It seems like there's definitely some nuance there, and then it's probably going to differ from jurisdiction to some extent, I would imagine.
Yes, less than you may think, because in the end, the world has been pretty much shaped from a legal point of view, at least by the West. So civil codes are not that different around the world.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm sure this is one of the oldest kind of business fields, of all time, is like land ownership and property ownership and so on and so forth. So that's actually really cool that there's like a lot of consensus, across the globe, because this could make it easier for us to create regulations that work within a lot of different jurisdictions for tokenized assets, or to kind of push it forward. So very interesting.
And I kind of advocate more for this model than the model of creating SPVs and putting the assets into an SPV and then tokenizing the SPV. Because in the end, the SPV is a company and you need to draft every year the balance sheet, there are operational costs, and it's a bit more intricate. If you have a custodian, he's a reliable custodian, it's better that you have this custodian that has all the assets. And then what I really like about this model is that the custodian and the Web3 service provider are two separate entities. So I could be the Web3 service provider, operate the platform, have my users, do my marketing, like whatever. And even maybe I'm not really good at running my business, I could go bankrupt. But it does not mean that my users, they lose their assets, because actually the assets are held by a custodian that has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it really seems to mitigate some risk in terms of separating these responsibilities. And I'm sure there's a lot of business potential in the future to be one of these types of holding companies that just literally holds assets. That's all that they do. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in that business. Doesn't sound very fun to me. A lot of paperwork, a lot of legal.
I mean, Tim was mentioning Signum Bank. I mean, I'm not sure we can mention brand names, but anyway, I have nothing to do with them. They don't pay me, so I think it's fine. But I don't know, a bank could be that party, and in particular, like Web3 banks that are more tech savvy.
I like to just add, we just talk about the very developed world. If we look at the problem perhaps in Africa, the River Nile is going 2 times a year over, it fills up, it destroys a lot of land. And afterwards happened one thing I saw, people fighting. No, I have 1 meter more. No, you have 1 meter less, Tokenization can help them. Because afterwards say, okay, it was like this, we have it here. It's fixed. This is your land. Don't take a meter more every year. There's really big fights on the farmers who are right on the River Nile. And this is something where we all also have to look at tokenization of real world assets. Not only our huge buildings we like to buy in the world where we are living in. I think in the developing countries, we have much more opportunities than here because they move much faster, We call it leapfrogging, They jump about it, They don't work with cable anymore. They have satellite connection. They are much faster now in adopting everything what we develop here. And this is something, will also lift a lot of assets. And when you look back to Charles Hoskinson in his famous TED Talks, he was talking about that as well. This tokenization was, I think, not the word tokenization he's using, but to give people some rights. And this comes with the tokenization of real world assets also in developing countries, which is, I think, very important also not to forget them.
That's a great point. Let's move to the next slide, Paul. I think we're going to extend by about 10 minutes from the original time since we had technical difficulties. I really want to get to the last slide eventually so we can kind of have like a little fun discussion before we end this chat, which I've really enjoyed so far. I hope the audience out there is enjoying it as well. So when we talk about fractionalization, if we think back to kind of the art piece that we looked at earlier, you can think, well, this piece of art, whether it's a Picasso painting, could be divided up into just mathematical units. Like, there's 100 tokens for the Picasso painting, and 1 token equals 1% of the quote-unquote value of the painting, right? But then the painting could also be fractionalized into NFTs, right? Into actual parts of the painting. So it's like maybe the eye on the Mona Lisa is more valuable than the bottom right corner of the Mona Lisa. And these type of nuances and differentiation between these assets can potentially create a more sophisticated market, because having these gaps creates opportunities, for, savvy folks, and ultimately gives them more control. So, one is clearly more efficient and the other is also interesting. Taking this example of the building here, so we tokenize this building as an NFT, right? And now that this building is tokenized as an NFT, putting legal aspects aside, let's just talk about the technology itself. I can transfer this NFT to somebody else, right? And that's the entire building. Now, let's say I have this building and I say, hey, I don't want to just sell the building to somebody else. I want to fractionalize it. So there's 2 different ways I could go here. And again, this isn't taking the legal aspects into consideration, but I could turn it into 20 fungible tokens where 1 token just equals 5% of the ownership of the building, right? And so this could be 5% of the rental income and 5% of the maintenance costs and 5%, of the equity, right? Whereas I could also fractionalize this building into NFTs where each unit is, is separate, right? And this is just a broad example. So maybe the unit on the top floor is worth more than the unit on the bottom floor because it has a better view, or maybe one of the units has more square footage, or maybe one of the units has stains on the carpet. Again, it's interesting to think of it like this. And it's like, one thing I was thinking could be really interesting is like a storage unit where it's like, speaking of investments for young people, it's like if you take a storage facility and then all of a sudden you fractionalize it and each storage unit becomes something that someone could potentially purchase and earn rental income off of, that would make, that an investment like that a lot more accessible to young people who may not be able to afford, to get into commercial real estate or something like that. So that's kind of an exploration of how we can fractionalize assets into either fungible tokens that can be traded efficiently on a token dex, or maybe NFTs that are a little bit more nuanced but give potential investors more control over the exact attributes of the asset that they're purchasing.
John, if I can follow up on
go ahead.
what you just said, I pretty much agree with everything you said. And from a legal point of view, I think that the point is that there is not a unique model. Like these 2 models, they can work. You can craft the legal terms for each one of them and make them work. I think the important thing is to be very transparent with the users about what they are purchasing and what they're getting in order to make sure that the expectations are aligned. Nobody is kind of misled about what they will get. But I think it's also important to make people understand that there is not one single real-world asset tokenization model. There are actually different nuances, different models that can be implemented. And I think in areas in which there is not much regulation, usually self-regulation develops. And I'm sure at some point some standards will be developed. There will be, I don't know, the Real World Asset Tokenization Association that groups maybe the major platforms, and they will establish some standards themselves.
I like to have a talk about a negative effect also. If we talk about real estate, in Berlin, it's very tough to get an apartment. If there's apartment free, you will fight about it with minimum 150 people. Okay, so you queue in line the whole day. Then you have your 5 minutes. Hey, I'm Tim. I like to buy. La 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 la. They now, it's forbidden to buy a whole building and sell the different apartments, because they like to protect the apartments for people that they can afford it. Because Berlin was a big problem that when the wall broke down, the big companies bought everything what they can got, made it like renovated it and sold it luxury apartments. So the people in the city, they have to move out of the city. This is, I'm a big fan of tokenization of real world assets, don't get me wrong. But I think also we always have to look at, do we construct something which has negative effects? And this is the model, and it's great, the presentation, but we have to think about sometimes there's laws which don't allow us. So I think, especially real estate, that's the reason why I said this in the beginning. It's so complicated. In Germany, it's from city to city we have different laws. And Germany is a small country. If I look at the US, I don't know if every state regulates it the same. Also, if it's in Germany, from we call it Bundesland, from small state to state is different, and from country to country in Europe is different. So we have to make it step-by-step solutions, and we always have to see, are there negative effects? I was saying, okay, as a student, I don't have money. I like to fractionalize and buy and invest. Oh, everything is already gone. I can't tokenize anymore. Yeah? So this is also very important when we look at the social aspects, what we are doing. We are high commercial people. We like to build up companies, and we think like investors. But on the other side, we don't have to forget negative parts, especially in real estate. In Germany, this is a huge problem. In Berlin, the problem is so high that they closed this possibility already.
Just going to say here, sorry, Nicola, just 1 minute and then I'll let you go. Just on time-wise, we are about 10 minutes or slightly less left in the roundtable here. So just if there is stuff that you want to get to, there is one question on stablecoins there. So Nicola, I'll let you finish. Then I'll go to the stablecoin question and see what we want to use the last 5 minutes for then, just to keep us on point.
I'll be super brief because I agree in general with what Tim was saying, and like gentrification and this social impact of like investment of these kind of investments. But just one point to your example, big funds came in, bought a lot of real estate. These big funds are owned probably by a few wealthy people, or at least like Jon was mentioning it earlier. He said the wealth gap. I agree. Like there is this wealth gap, and there is a gap in the access to investment opportunities. And so, yes, I mean, gentrification is not a nice thing, but for as it is, I would prefer that it's a sort of like, I don't know, a fund that is owned by 100,000 token holders that purchases and resells this real estate and then share the profit with a lot of people that then can use this money in their life, rather than an hedge fund that is owned by a few super wealthy families that gets. And guys, I'm not like Occupy Wall Street really, like, but I think everybody that has access to internet can check that over the past 30 years, the level of inequalities is growing and growing and growing. And at some point, we'll need to do something about it.
The government who forbids to say, okay, we can't fractionalize, they can offer a fund for students. Hey, this building, only students. You can buy your tokens, So we will find the best way, I think, in the next 10 years. We just have to be aware that we have to also ask the critical questions sometimes, And like I already told you, I'm here because I'm a huge fan. I work 12 hours for tokenization of real world assets. And I just like to have these questions that they are not we have to mention them. This is the only reason why I talked about this.
Yeah, I'm going to put the question that we have here on RWAs, and then John, I'll hand it to you to go to maybe one, maybe two slides, whichever we have time for. Comes from Cardano Wiki. What about stablecoins? Are they considered real world assets? After all, this is tokenization of a real world asset. Thoughts on this? Are stablecoins the first real world asset or tokenized asset?
I think to some extent, yes. Even though, like, from a maybe like mental point of view, it seems a bit counterintuitive, but in the end, money is an asset. So yeah.
Yeah, stablecoin backed up with fiat money. It's a real world asset, I think. Huh? It's the same. Gold is also very it's handled very special. Let's say like this: in Germany, you don't have a value-added tax for it, and it's very fiat close. Yeah, it's very money close, and it's also real world asset. And money, I think the same. If we look at a stablecoin, yes, it's a good question. A little bit, I think from the real heuristic standpoint, legal standpoint, complicated. I don't know, but I heard the same. That money, fiat money, if you do a stable coin backed, it's an asset, a real world asset.
I would tend to agree on that, just technically. I think it's a little bit different than anything else. But, I mean, yeah, technically it's a real world asset. Paul, if we can move to well, this was a good slide too. Well, I'll just briefly touch on this, and then if we can just skip to the last slide, I'd love to leave the audience with just kind of some hope and vision for the future. So, real world assets, in their tokenized forms, we talked about tokenization. They can be bought and sold on a marketplace. There's different types of marketplaces. They can, if they're fractionalized into, well, there's either fungible tokens or NFTs. There can be liquidity pools. They can be paired with a digital asset, just like a crypto token, and traded very efficiently on a DEX. And then they can also be used, and this is really exciting, for collateralized lending. And I mean, what a great use case there, for efficient lending purposes. I don't want to get into the legalities of all of that just for time's sake, but I just think with the efficiency that tokenization of real world assets provides, I mean, there's just so much opportunity in decentralized finance. Let's skip to the last slide, Paul, and just kind of give this. We went over some of this. Let's go to So I think this is just an opportunity for us to kind of, look at some of the other ways that real world assets are being used, aside from just investment purposes, and maybe we can go around and talk about something that's exciting for the future, like of real world assets. So we've seen, I'll just go through these examples quickly. We've seen there's a company that's actually transforming, well, they're associating a vehicle with a token, a tokenized vehicle, and it associates like how many miles a vehicle has and everything like that. Super interesting. Obviously, we've seen NFT tickets. We've seen them for big concerts. Technically, that's a real-world asset. I
use them already. NFT as a ticket is brilliant. That is, for me. I wonder why we don't have a NFT ticket DEX on Cardano or somewhere.
I'm sure we will at some point.
Yeah, we have to. I bought a ticket for Tomorrow Festival. It's in the Electro Festival in Amsterdam, and the NFT gives you, if you buy the ticket as an NFT, you are preferred to get the next tickets because it's always sold out. So I was keen on getting the NFT just because, I have an advantage next year already. So NFT tickets, big business opportunity. Go in and do it.
Absolutely. Now, so and then well, Nike did a NFT sneaker where the sneaker actually had, I think, RFID or something associated with the token ID, so the ownership of the physical item was associated with the NFT. So a lot of interesting potential there. Here's a couple of the interesting ideas or things that may or may not come to be in the future. But having worked in the apparel industry, you can see like in this picture, there's a lot of different, looks like aprons here with a gajillion different colorways and a gajillion different sizes. And working at Nike, I would just say if these designs for each of these assets was an NFT and each NFT had a size attribute and a color attribute and everything like that, it would increase the efficiency of pretty much every aspect of Nike's operations, from product creation and management and tech packs in China to pre-sales. Imagine using NFTs to do pre-sales for large, between a wholesale manufacturer and large retail operations. Just the efficiency increase alone would save them tremendous amounts of money. And then I was thinking in the future, they have some of these apps for like phones and stuff like that, but there's a lot of manual processes. But perhaps when we go to the grocery store in the future, the receipt at the checkout will be an NFT, and each item that we purchased at the store can be tokenized and represented. So all of a sudden, we have on our phone, how many bananas we bought and how much, what type of food we're eating, and it can be integrated into our nutrition apps, and we can see how much we're wasting, and then all of a sudden we can use this data to improve in these areas, like holistically, like as a society, in terms of food waste or nutrition. So there's just so much potential for real world assets beyond just investment, which, I mean, investment is extremely exciting, but I can't wait to see where things go with real world assets. And before we end, I just wanted to give my roundtable buddies here an opportunity to talk about what they're excited about in terms of the future of real world assets.
Nicola, do you want, this kind of ties in with two questions in the audience, and this kind of ties in with the industries that we believe are most likely to adopt RWAs. I think Jon has covered a lot of them there. And there's one more question. I'll see, can we get to that? But Nicola and Tim, if you have 1 to 2 minutes each, just to kind of round out your thoughts on RWAs and some of the stuff we discussed here.
I will use even less so that maybe we can answer the questions from the crowd. I pretty much agree with what all that Jon said right now, and I see a lot of use cases in different areas. Honestly, I cannot predict which one will pick up. Like even the one of tickets for concerts. Come on, guys! Everybody knows there are huge scandals on the secondary market for concerts. Even the artists themselves are pissed about it because they don't make so much money, and there is, I don't know, these platforms are like resellers that collect a lot of tickets and then resell. So this is a very tangible and practical and concrete use case that can be implemented tomorrow or even yesterday. And Tim already saw that at Tomorrowland, and I'm happy they're doing that, by the way. And I think really, maybe this is maybe a general comment on our industry, we need to become more practical. Like, for instance, here, there is a big opportunity. I would love if someone from the crowd that is listening to us started startups for the tokenization of concert tickets and start partnering up with artists that want to cut the middleman and go straight to their audience and reduce fees and extra costs and have a more reliable way of getting people into the stadiums for their concerts. Like, this is just a very concrete example, and it's something that, like, we have the technology to do it. Cardano, like, we have the technology to do a lot of things. We need for people to start doing them and for the option to pick up. And for sure, also we need to get better at the user experience. In my view, you should have apps in which, I don't know, my mom can use it. You don't even need to know what's a wallet, basically. And we are getting there slowly, but we need to get there if we really want more adoption for our beautiful technology.
That's perfect that you say, I affiliated with a wallet, and we always call it internally, it has to be a mom's wallet, My mom has to use it, and she's not a niche of a niche. She's not a trader. She likes to buy a concert ticket. She likes to buy an eSIM. She likes to travel. She likes to book hotels, flights, This is, where I also see an obstacle which is fading away slowly, that we open up everything for normal non-crypto people, because they are the majority. We are a little bit the niche of a niche, or we are the pioneers, and we have to help people to understand this space. And back to the question, what industries do you believe are the most likely to adopt a real-world asset first? I think it's naturally that you first start with easier parts, which is like commodities, and then you move more and more to securities. Gold and precious metals are in the middle. Gold and silver, it's quite easy to handle if you dig into it. But like I said, my dream is to tokenize real estate. But this is, for me, it's very difficult, very difficult. But we can talk about this another hour, Nicola, if you have time in the future, because this is, if we lived with Cardano, the biggest asset in the world that we can have, you tokenize real estate on Cardano, we will have an inflow of liquidity. No stablecoin can do this. So I hope that Cardano will focus, or some people, some good projects will focus on realizing real world asset, especially real estate in the future.
Yeah, I think some very good suggestions there. I really like the ticketing aspect of what's possible there in the future. And like you say, that it's not just access to the event, it means something else. And even if I only want to go to the event, I can sell the ticket on afterwards. It still has value to someone else. It's their priority into the next concert or things like that. So they're the aspects I'd love to see us get into. There's one more question I'm going to get into, but just guys, personally, I want to thank you for your time today. I've learned a lot. I hope people watching have learned a lot too. And maybe we can do some follow-ups on this, maybe even deep diving into the different sections. We talked about a lot with the basics on RWAs here, looking at identity, why you need KYC, what you can do with the RWAs. Then we didn't just get to dive into that as much in terms of using them for collateralization and how it can benefit the holders and the advantages there. Letting these smaller people invest. The legal side with Nicola, I'd love to dive a lot deeper into that someday too, to look at some of the different aspects. We talked a lot about the real estate market today, but just as we're talking about towards the end there's a lot of other aspects of RWAs. And just the final question then from the community was, what about an association owning all the assets and linking members' investments through NFTs to their desired fractions of real world assets? Not sure, does it mean a central entity then for it, or is that going away from the idea of decentralized and fractionalizing assets?
I think yes, then we centralize a decentralized world we like to build. So it's special. It's special how you build up these association owning all the assets. But finally, there's someone who makes decisions on this entity, on this association. And I think we're all here to and we are proud that Cardano is so decentralized. And this is one of our maxims, that we try to decentralize the world in the next 15 to 20 years, right?
I agree. And I think with this technology, with tokenization, with fractionalization, we will naturally see the ownership of assets across the world become more decentralized. I think it's critical that we adopt this technology because we don't want to live in a world where just a few people just own everything and we're essentially their financial slaves, right? And like Nicola, I'm not like Occupy Wall Street either. Like, I believe in business and I believe in capitalism, But at the same point, this just will make everything so much more better, so much more cost efficient, and really open up the door to a lot of opportunities of people. And I think it'll just improve the economy globally. So I just can't wait to see more adoption in real world assets. And it's exciting times.
Yeah, so I think we will leave it there. The speakers we had on today, the details to follow along with them are down below to check out what they're doing individually as well. Once again, guys, thanks very much. Anyone who has made it this far, we do appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you got some value from this. Please do share it out and let others know what's possible, or give them a good introduction to RWAs, and leave suggestions down below for some more roundtable experiences you would like to see from Cardano too. So thanks for watching, guys, and my guests here as well. Thanks very much, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Paul.